The stars had always been humanity's dream. For centuries, people looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. On March 15, 2187, they got their answer. A massive ship appeared above Earth's moon, larger than any city, gleaming with lights that pulsed in patterns no human had ever seen. The message came through every radio, every television, every device capable of receiving a signal. They called themselves the Galactic Coalition, and they came in peace. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Horizon's Promise, humanity's finest civilian vessel, watching the alien mothership grow larger through the viewscreen. He was a tall man with sandy brown hair and calm blue eyes that had seen 3 decades of space travel. Today, those eyes sparkled with excitement. Behind him stood 50 of Earth's best and brightest, diplomats, scientists, linguists, all chosen to represent humanity to the galaxy. The coalition greeting party was beyond anything humans had imagined. There were beings that looked like giant insects with shimmering wings. Others appeared to be living crystals that hummed with inner light. Some walked on 4 legs, others floated without any legs at all. The lead diplomat, a tall crystalline being named Thalera Ambassador Quix, spoke through a translation device that turned its musical chimes into perfect English. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched the meeting from Luna Base, Earth's military headquarters on the moon. She was a sharp woman in her 40s with short black hair and dark eyes that missed nothing. While the rest of humanity celebrated first contact, she studied the data the Coalition had provided. Something felt wrong. The Coalition controlled thousands of star systems, but their historical records showed very few new species joining in recent centuries. Where were all the other young civilizations? Down on Earth, Dr. Peter Kim worked late in his office at the United Nations Translation Center. He was a thin man with glasses who preferred computers to people. The Coalition had sent over massive data files about their history and culture. Peter was supposed to be organizing them, making them ready for human researchers. Instead, he found something strange. Some files were corrupted, showing fragments of text that did not match the official histories. Words like purification and necessary elimination appeared again and again. Peter called his colleague Megan Cole, an AI specialist who worked in the same building. She was younger than Peter, energetic and brilliant, with red hair usually tied back in a messy bun. Together, they worked through the night using Megan's programs to reconstruct the corrupted files. What they found made their blood run cold. The Galactic Coalition had a system for evaluating new species. Every civilization that developed space travel was studied, tested, and classified. Species that were peaceful and cooperative were welcomed. Species that showed potential for aggression were given a threat rating. Category 1 was lowest, basically harmless. Category 5 was highest, representing an existential danger to galactic peace. Humanity had been classified as Category 5. The file explained the reasoning in cold, clinical language. Humans had developed nuclear weapons within 70 years of discovering powered flight. They had fought 2 world wars in a single century. Their literature and entertainment glorified violence and conflict. Psychological profiles suggested humans were territorial, aggressive, and dangerously creative in developing new ways to kill each other. The conclusion was clear. Humanity was too dangerous to be allowed into the galaxy. The final part of the file detailed the solution. A purification fleet was already on its way to Earth. 200 warships carrying weapons capable of burning entire planets. Estimated arrival time 6 months. The mission: complete extermination of humanity before they could spread beyond their solar system. Peter and Megan sat in stunned silence, the words glowing on the screen between them. Finally, Megan whispered, "We have to tell someone." They sent the files directly to Admiral Sullivan's secure terminal. Kate was in a meeting with Earth's defense chiefs when the alert flashed red across her screen. She read the files once, then read them again to be sure she understood. Her face went pale, then hard as stone. She stood up and locked the conference room doors. "Gentlemen," she said quietly, "we have a problem." On the Coalition mothership, Jake Morrison was enjoying a cultural exchange dinner when his communicator buzzed with an emergency code. He excused himself politely and stepped into a side corridor to read Kate's message. His hand trembled as he scrolled through the evidence. He looked back at the Coalition delegates laughing and eating, celebrating this historic meeting. They knew. They all knew. Jake quickly gathered his senior staff and showed them the files. The mood shifted instantly from joy to horror. Communications Officer Lisa Grant suggested they confront the coalition immediately. Jake shook his head. First, we need to get everyone back to the shuttle, quietly, act natural. But it was too late. As Jake's team began moving toward the hangar bay, coalition security forces blocked their path. The insectoid Vryn warriors clicked their mandibles, weapons charging with blue energy. Ambassador Quix appeared, its crystalline body chiming sadly. We regret that you discovered this information prematurely, Captain Morrison, the translator spoke. It would have been kinder for your species to remain unaware until the end. Jake felt rage building in his chest, hot and fierce. You are planning to murder 8 billion people and you are worried about being kind? You do not understand, Quix replied. The galaxy has been at peace for 10,000 years. Species like yours, violent and aggressive, threaten that peace. We have learned through terrible experience that it is better to prevent catastrophe than to clean up after it. Humanity's extinction is regrettable but necessary. The hell it is, Jake said. He grabbed Lisa's arm and ran. His team scattered, racing through corridors while coalition forces pursued. Most were caught, but Jake, Lisa, and 3 others made it to an emergency shuttle. Jake fired up the engines while laser fire splashed against the hull. The small ship tore out of the hangar, spinning wildly as Jake pushed the throttle to maximum. Behind them, the coalition mothership's weapons charged, preparing to destroy the fleeing shuttle. Jake saw his death coming and prepared for it. Then the Horizon's Promise, still docked nearby, fired every weapon it had at the mothership. The surprise attack gave Jake's shuttle just enough time to engage emergency faster than light drive. They jumped toward Earth, leaving behind the destroyed Horizon's Promise, and everyone still aboard. Jake stared at the viewscreen, tears running down his face. They had sacrificed themselves to give him time to warn Earth, time to prepare for war. The communication came through as they approached Luna Base. It was Admiral Sullivan, her face grim but determined. Captain Morrison, by the time you arrive, Earth will be under unified military command. We have 6 months to prepare for the impossible, 6 months to build weapons, 6 months to create a military from nothing, 6 months to figure out how to fight an empire that spans thousands of worlds. Jake wiped his eyes and straightened in his seat. Then we better not waste a single second. Across Earth, the news spread like wildfire. The aliens were not friends. They were executioners, and humanity had 6 months to do something it had always been terrifyingly good at: prepare for war. The clock started counting down the moment Jake Morrison's shuttle landed on Luna Base. 6 months, 180 days, 4,320 hours. Every second mattered now. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood before the United Earth Council. Representatives from every nation gathered in emergency session. The debate that should have taken months happened in 6 hours. Old enemies became instant allies when faced with extinction. By midnight, Kate had absolute authority over every military resource on Earth, Mars, and the scattered colonies in the asteroid belt. The Terran Defense Initiative was born, and Kate Sullivan became humanity's supreme military commander. Her first call went to Commander Ryan Hayes, a career Navy officer with 20 years of experience in space operations. Ryan was a stocky man with gray hair and hands scarred from years of hands-on engineering work. Kate's orders were simple and impossible: build a military fleet capable of fighting the coalition in 6 months. Ryan looked at Earth's current space assets and wanted to laugh. They had mining ships, colony transports, research vessels, and exactly 12 ships that could generously be called military craft. These were patrol boats designed to stop pirates and smugglers, not warships. The coalition was bringing 200 vessels designed to destroy planets. We cannot build new ships in time, Ryan told his engineering team, so we retrofit everything that flies. Mining ships become missile platforms. Colony transports become troop carriers. We weld armor plates onto cargo haulers and mount railguns on satellites. If it has an engine, we make it a weapon. Lisa Grant, the communications officer who escaped with Jake, was promoted to head of Project Prometheus. Her job was simple: weaponize everything. The nuclear arsenals that had been slowly dismantled after humanity's last global conflicts were brought back and modified for space combat. Chemical weapons banned by international treaty were examined and improved. Experimental technologies that were decades away from practical use were pushed into immediate production. Lisa worked 20-hour days, surviving on coffee and determination. She took weapons designed to kill humans and scaled them up to kill aliens. Railguns that could punch through ship armor. Electromagnetic pulse devices that could disable electronic systems. Kinetic kill vehicles. Basically rocks accelerated to incredible speeds. Every nightmare weapon humanity had ever conceived was dusted off and made real. Meanwhile, Dr. Peter Kim and Megan Cole continued analyzing the Coalition data files. If humanity was going to fight, they needed to know their enemy's weaknesses. Peter discovered something interesting in the Coalition medical records. Every species in the Coalition evolved on worlds with lower gravity than Earth. Their bodies were not built for high acceleration forces. Human pilots could survive maneuvers that would literally tear Coalition crews apart. Megan found more good news in the Coalition military databases. They had not fought a real war in over 10,000 years. Their tactics were all theoretical, tested only in simulations. Their ships were designed for efficiency and long-range combat, not close-quarters fighting. Most importantly, their doctrine assumed enemies would surrender when faced with overwhelming force. The Coalition had never encountered an enemy that fought to the death. This information went straight to Lieutenant Amy Scott, a fighter pilot chosen to lead Earth's new Void Fighter Corps. Amy was young, barely 25, with quick reflexes and nerves of steel. She read the reports and smiled grimly. If humans could handle higher acceleration, then they would make that their advantage. Amy designed training programs that would have been considered torture in peacetime. Pilots were pushed through sustained 8G turns until they passed out, then trained to recover and keep fighting. They practiced combat maneuvers that assumed the enemy could not match their speed or agility. Amy's philosophy was brutal. Train harder than you fight because you only bleed in training, you die in combat. The Void Fighter Corps attracted volunteers from every nation's Air Force and Navy. Pilots who had been enemies months ago now trained together, united by the simple fact that they were all about to die fighting an overwhelming enemy. They might as well die well. On Earth's surface, Sergeant Danny Torres was given an equally impossible task: prepare for planetary invasion. Danny was a veteran of peacekeeping missions in Africa and the Middle East, a compact man with sharp eyes and a mind full of nasty tricks. He knew the Coalition would not stop at defeating humanity's fleet. They would come to the ground and finish the job. Danny trained irregular forces in guerrilla warfare. He taught civilians how to build improvised explosives from common materials. He showed farmers how to turn their land into killing grounds. He organized resistance cells in every major city, preparing for the day when Coalition forces landed. His message was simple: make them pay for every meter of ground. Make Earth so costly to conquer that they regret ever coming here. Children volunteered for civil defense forces. Teenagers lied about their ages to join combat units. The elderly formed home guard units determined to defend their communities. Humanity had never been more unified or more determined. The countdown clock became a focus for everything. Parents tucked children into bed and counted down the days. Engineers worked through the night counting down the hours. Soldiers trained until they collapsed, counting down the minutes. Jake Morrison, now commanding a destroyer hastily converted from a mining ship, watched the frantic preparations from orbit. His ship, the Defiant, was typical of humanity's new fleet. It was ugly, covered in welded armor plates and bristling with mismatched weapons. The life support system rattled. The engines vibrated constantly, and the artificial gravity failed twice a day. But it could fight. Kate Sullivan inspected the fleet from Luna Base and felt a mixture of pride and sadness. Humanity had built over 300 warships in 6 months, an achievement that should have been impossible. But she had seen the cost. Workers had died in construction accidents. Factory explosions had killed hundreds. The emergency conscription had torn families apart. Even if they won, humanity would never be the same. The Coalition had wanted Earth to be peaceful and cooperative. Instead, they had forced humans to become exactly what they feared: a species entirely focused on warfare. As the countdown entered its final week, Kate gave a speech broadcast to every human settlement in the solar system. She stood in her uniform, metals gleaming, gray hair tied back severely. Behind her, through the window, Earth floated blue and green and beautiful. "They are coming to kill us," Kate said simply. "The Coalition believes we are monsters, too dangerous to exist. They think our history of warfare makes us evil. They think our capacity for violence makes us wrong. Maybe they are right. Maybe we are monsters. But we are monsters who love our children. Monsters who write poetry and paint pictures and dream of stars. Monsters who refuse to die quietly. She paused, letting the words sink in. In 3 days, the Coalition fleet will arrive. They have better ships, better weapons, and thousands of years of experience. We have 6 months of desperate preparation and the absolute certainty that we have nowhere to run. So here is what we are going to do. We are going to hit them so hard that the galaxy remembers Earth forever. We are going to show them what real monsters look like. And if we die knowing that we fought with everything we had. Kate's final words became a rallying cry across Earth. They wanted monsters. Let's show them what real monsters look like. The last 3 days passed in tense silence. Ships moved into position. Weapons were armed and checked 1,000 times. Soldiers said goodbye to families, knowing they would probably never see them again. Children held parents tight, not understanding why everyone was so scared. On the bridge of the Defiant, Jake Morrison watched the sensor screens with his skeleton crew. Lisa Grant sat at communications, her fingers dancing over controls. Ryan Hayes commanded the flagship alongside Kate Sullivan, ready to lead the desperate defense. The countdown reached 0. Sensors flared with incoming contacts. 200 Coalition warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system, their ships gleaming and perfect and unstoppable. The Battle of Earth was about to begin. The Coalition purification fleet appeared like a storm on the edge of the solar system. 200 massive warships, each one gleaming with the polish of a civilization that had never known defeat. At the center of the formation, Fleet Commander Zethal sat in his command throne, mandibles clicking with satisfaction. The Vryn warrior had executed 17 purification missions in his career, all through simulation. This would be his first real extermination. The human response was immediate. Every sensor in the fleet lit up with targeting locks. Every communication channel filled with warning tones. And then came a single-word response from Admiral Kate Sullivan, broadcast on all frequencies. No. Zethal's translator struggled with the concept. Clarify. Do you reject the Coalition's judgment? Kate's voice was ice cold. I reject your existence. You came to murder my species. Now we are going to show you what a mistake that was. The Coalition fleet opened fire. Energy weapons designed to crack planetary crust lanced across the void. They struck humanity's outer defense platforms, massive structures built from hollowed-out asteroids. The platforms exploded in brilliant flashes, taking their crews with them. In the first 10 minutes, humanity lost a quarter of its static defenses, but the platforms had done their job. They absorbed the first devastating strike and gave the mobile fleet time to scatter. Ryan Hayes, commanding the flagship Liberty, watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. All ships execute dispersion pattern Omega. Make them chase us. The human fleet broke apart like a swarm of angry hornets. Destroyers like Jake's Defiant accelerated hard, pulling 8 gravities that would have killed any Coalition crew. Cruisers dove and weaved, refusing to present stable targets. Missile boats launched their payloads and retreated at maximum burn. Zethal watched the human ships scatter and felt something unfamiliar. Confusion. His tactical computer had predicted the humans would form a defensive wall around their planet. Instead, they were running in seemingly random directions. His fleet's perfect firing solutions meant nothing when the targets refused to cooperate. Pursue and destroy, Zethal ordered. All ships, free weapons. The Coalition fleet began its pursuit, and that was when they learned their first lesson about fighting humans. Jake Morrison's Defiant completed a turn at 9 gravities, coming around behind a Coalition cruiser that was moving too slowly to react. Jake's weapons officer, a former mining engineer named Greg Palmer, had never fired a shot in anger before today. He fired now. Railgun rounds tore through the Coalition ship's engines. The cruiser tried to bring its shields around, but Jake was already accelerating away, pulling gravities that made his crew scream into their pressure suits. The Coalition ship exploded as its reactor breached, the first kill of the battle. Amy Scott led her Void Fighter Corps against the Coalition's screening vessels. Her pilots flew patterns that looked suicidal, weaving through fields of fire that should have killed them instantly, but they were pulling sustained 7G turns, dodging faster than Coalition targeting systems could track. Amy's fighter screamed through a gap in a destroyer's shields and released its payload. 6 kinetic penetrators that punched through the hull and detonated inside. The Coalition destroyer died, and Amy was already gone, hunting her next target. Her communications channel filled with voices as her pilots scored kill after kill. The Coalition had assumed human fighters would be easy targets. Instead, they were nightmares, too fast and too aggressive to stop. But humanity was paying a terrible price. For every Coalition ship destroyed, 3 human vessels died. The numbers were simple and brutal. Earth's fleet could not win a war of attrition. Kate Sullivan knew this and had planned accordingly. "Activate the trap," she ordered quietly. Throughout the inner solar system, seemingly dead satellites suddenly powered up. These were Lisa Grant's special projects, electromagnetic pulse weapons that had been sitting cold and undetectable. They all fired at once, releasing massive bursts of energy that washed over the Coalition fleet. The advanced Coalition ships, with their sophisticated computers and automated systems, went dark. Not destroyed, just disabled, dead in space. And that was when Danny Torres's plan went into effect. Boarding pods launched from hidden positions on Mars and Luna. These were crewed vessels, basically armored boxes with engines and soldiers inside. They slammed into disabled Coalition ships and burned through airlocks with cutting torches. Sergeant Torres led the first boarding party personally, wearing a pressure suit and carrying weapons that would have been familiar to soldiers 3 centuries ago. The Coalition crew inside had never experienced combat before. They had trained in simulations, studied tactics, but they had never felt real fear when humans came boiling through their airlocks, firing weapons that threw metal slugs instead of energy beams. The Coalition crews panicked. Torres and his team moved through the Coalition ship with brutal efficiency. They knew they were outnumbered. They knew most of them would die. So they fought like cornered animals, using every dirty trick they knew. Booby traps, ambushes, fighting in the dark when the ship's lights failed. The Coalition soldiers, evolved on peaceful worlds, could not comprehend this kind of warfare. The cruiser's commander, a Thalara named Crystal Song, watched humans fighting on her security monitors and felt something she had never experienced: terror. These beings fought even when wounded. They kept coming even when their comrades fell beside them. When one human ran out of ammunition, he attacked with a knife. When another lost his weapon, he used his bare hands. Crystal Song surrendered, the first Coalition commander in 10,000 years to yield to an enemy. Torres accepted the surrender and moved on to the next ship. There were dozens more to take. The battle raged for 3 days without pause. Human pilots fought until they passed out from exhaustion, then woke up and fought again. Engineers worked around the clock to keep damaged ships fighting. Wounded soldiers refused medical evacuation, choosing to stay at their posts. Jake Morrison's Defiant took so much damage that life support failed in half the ship. Jake sealed off the damaged sections and kept fighting. Lisa Grant kept communication channels open even when shrapnel tore through her console and embedded in her arm. She wrapped the wound and kept working. Ryan Hayes' Liberty led charge after suicidal charge into the Coalition formation. His ship became a magnet for enemy fire, drawing attacks away from smaller vessels. When his shields failed, he kept going. When his armor burned away, he pressed the attack. Ryan knew he was going to die. He just wanted to take as many Coalition ships with him as possible. Zethal watched his perfect fleet being torn apart by insane monkeys and felt the unfamiliar taste of defeat. His ships were better. His weapons were superior. His crews were trained professionals. But the humans simply refused to acknowledge they were beaten. They fought with a desperation and creativity that no simulation had ever predicted. When a human destroyer was crippled and dead in space, it would use its last power to position itself as a collision hazard. When ammunition ran out, human ships rammed Coalition vessels. When reactors failed, they were deliberately overloaded to create explosions. The humans were turning their defeats into weapons. On the 4th day, with more than half his fleet destroyed or disabled, Zethal gave the order he never imagined speaking. All ships retreat to Rally Point Beta. We are withdrawing. The Coalition fleet jumped to faster than light, running from Earth. Behind them, they left wreckage, debris, and the shattered remains of over 100 Coalition warships. Humanity had won. On Luna Base, Kate Sullivan sat in her command chair and allowed herself to shake. They had lost 70% of the fleet. Over 500,000 people were dead. Earth's orbital infrastructure was devastated. But they had won. The coalition had retreated. Jake Morrison's Defiant limped back to Luna Base, its hull scorched and riddled with holes. Jake climbed out of his ship and collapsed on the hangar deck. Medics rushed over, but he waved them away. "Check my crew first." "I am fine." He was not fine. None of them were fine. But they were alive. Amy Scott landed her fighter with one engine and no landing gear, scraping across the deck in a shower of sparks. She crawled out and kissed the ground. Of the 300 pilots who started the battle, 97 survived. The celebration across Earth was brief. People cried and cheered and held each other. But Kate Sullivan knew the truth. They had won one battle against a single fleet. The coalition controlled thousands of worlds and millions of ships. They would be back, and next time they would bring overwhelming force. Kate stood and addressed her remaining commanders. "We have maybe 6 months before they return. This time we do not wait for them. We take the fight to the coalition. We hit them so hard they beg for peace. The war was just beginning." Kate Sullivan stood in the war room, staring at the holographic map of coalition space. Red dots marked enemy strongholds. Blue dots showed human positions, pathetically few compared to the enemy. The other admirals and generals waited for her decision, knowing that whatever she chose would determine humanity's fate. "We cannot win a defensive war," Kate said finally. "Every battle we win costs us ships we cannot replace. The coalition can lose 1,000 fleets and still come back. We need to change the equation." Ryan Hayes, recovering from injuries sustained during the Battle of Earth, leaned forward in his wheelchair. "You want to attack them?" "I want to terrorize them," Kate replied. "We make the galaxy afraid of us. We hit their economic centers, their supply lines, their civilian infrastructure. We make them understand that if Earth burns, the entire galaxy burns with us." The room fell silent. What Kate was proposing was not warfare, it was something darker. Some called it terrorism. Others called it survival. Dr. Peter Kim, now serving as a strategic advisor, spoke up quietly. "The coalition has never experienced real fear. Their species evolved without predators. They do not understand visceral terror. We need to teach them." The plan was simple and brutal. Captured coalition ships, retrofitted with human life support and weapons, would strike deep into enemy territory. They would avoid military targets and instead destroy the infrastructure that made coalition civilization comfortable. Mining stations, trade hubs, commercial shipping lanes, manufacturing centers. Every attack would be recorded and broadcast across coalition networks. Jake Morrison volunteered to lead the first strike force. His crew, veterans of the Battle of Earth, knew this was a one-way mission. They would strike fast and deep, knowing they probably would not make it home. Jake stood before them in the hangar bay of their captured coalition cruiser, now renamed Payback. "We are not soldiers," Jake told his crew. "Soldiers fight for victory. We are something worse. We are the nightmare that the coalition created when they tried to exterminate us. Our job is to make them regret that decision every single day." The Payback and 5 other captured ships jumped into coalition space and began their campaign of destruction. Their first target was the Meridian Mining Station, a massive facility that processed rare metals for coalition industry. The station had minimal defenses because it was deep in coalition territory, far from any possible threat. Jake's ships appeared without warning and opened fire. They did not try to capture the station. They destroyed it completely, vaporizing billions of credits worth of infrastructure in minutes. Before coalition forces could respond, the human ships jumped away. The attack was broadcast across coalition networks with a simple message recorded by Peter Kim. "You came to our home to kill us. Now we come to yours. Surrender and accept peace or watch your civilization burn." The effect was immediate and devastating. The coalition had lived in peace for 10,000 years. They had built their economy on the assumption that space was safe. Suddenly it was not safe. Insurance rates for civilian shipping increased 1,000% overnight. Trade between systems slowed to a crawl as merchants demanded military escorts. Lisa Grant, now promoted to intelligence operations, coordinated a psychological warfare campaign. Footage from the Battle of Earth was edited and distributed through coalition networks. Images of human soldiers fighting hand-to-hand in zero gravity. Videos of damaged human ships ramming coalition vessels in suicide attacks. Recordings of human pilots laughing as they flew through fields of fire that should have killed them. The effect on coalition populations was profound. Species that had never known war watched humans fighting with a ferocity that seemed impossible. The Vryn warrior caste, humiliated by their defeat, demanded escalation. But the Thalara crystalline beings, who valued logic above emotion, began to question whether exterminating humanity was worth the cost. Amy Scott led fighter wings on harassment raids across the Coalition frontier. Her tactics were simple: appear from nowhere, destroy the target, vanish before reinforcements arrived. Her pilots became ghosts that haunted Coalition space, striking randomly and without warning. Transport ships carrying luxury goods were destroyed. Communication satellites were disabled. Even civilian passenger liners were boarded, and their crews terrorized before being released unharmed with another warning message. Some human commanders questioned these tactics. Was this really different from what the Coalition had tried to do to Earth? Kate Sullivan's answer was cold and pragmatic. The difference is that we stop when they surrender. We are not trying to exterminate them. We are trying to make them fear us enough to leave us alone. Meanwhile, Danny Torres was exported to conquered Coalition worlds, training resistance movements. He discovered something the Coalition had tried to hide. They had enslaved dozens of species over the centuries. These populations hated their Coalition overlords and saw humanity's rebellion as inspiration. Torres taught them guerrilla warfare tactics. He provided weapons captured from Coalition forces. Most importantly, he gave them hope. On the industrial world of Kelrath Prime, Torres trained former slaves in sabotage and hit-and-run attacks. The Kelrath were a warrior species that the Coalition had conquered 500 years ago. They had never forgotten how to fight. The Kelrath uprising began with coordinated strikes across their homeworld. Coalition governors and military commanders were assassinated. Weapons depots were raided. Industrial facilities were destroyed. The Coalition sent troops to restore order, but the Kelrath fought with the desperation learned from watching human broadcasts. They refused to surrender. They refused to negotiate. They simply fought the Coalition fractured. The Thalara Council of Logic published a report showing that humanity's extinction would now cost more resources than simply accepting their existence. The Vryn warrior caste rejected this analysis and demanded total war. The crystalline core species, who had remained neutral, began advocating for peace negotiations. Lisa Grant's greatest achievement came when she successfully hacked into Coalition military communications. She discovered that the Coalition Defense Committee was paralyzed by indecision. Half wanted to negotiate, half wanted to escalate. The stalemate meant that no coordinated response to human attacks was possible. Lisa immediately leaked this information to Coalition civilian networks, showing their populations that their leaders were helpless. Jake Morrison's strike force continued operations for 6 months before their luck ran out. The payback was ambushed by a Coalition battle group near the outer rim. The fight was brief and brutal. Jake managed to evacuate most of his crew before his ship was destroyed, but he went down with the payback, firing weapons until the very end. His last message to Kate Sullivan was simple: "Tell Earth we gave them hell." But Jake's sacrifice was not in vain. The captured Coalition ships yielded their technology, and human engineers had been studying it carefully. Lisa Grant worked with scientists at Mars shipyards to reverse engineer Coalition faster-than-light drives. The human version was uglier and less efficient, but it worked. Ryan Hayes, recovered from his injuries, oversaw construction of Earth's first true interstellar warships. These vessels were not retrofitted civilian ships. They were purpose-built weapons designed by a species that had spent 6 months learning how to kill efficiently. The new fleet looked nothing like Coalition ships with their smooth curves and aesthetic beauty. Human warships were angular, brutal, and covered in weapons. The first of the new fleet, christened Revenge, launched from Mars shipyards 1 year after the Battle of Earth. It was followed by 50 more vessels over the next 6 months. Each ship carried a crew that volunteered, knowing they were probably going to die. Each ship was named after something lost: Revenge, Retribution, Remember, Defiance, Fury. Kate Sullivan stood on Luna Base and watched the new fleet assemble. She was 51 now, her hair completely gray, her face lined with stress. She had aged 10 years in the past 18 months, but her eyes were as hard as ever. "Admiral," Peter Kim said quietly beside her, "the Coalition Council has requested peace negotiations." Kate looked at the fleet, then at Peter. "Do they actually want peace, or do they want time to prepare another attack?" My analysis suggests genuine interest in negotiation. The Thalara have convinced enough council members that continuing the war is illogical. The Vryn are opposed, but they are losing political power. Kate nodded slowly. Tell them we will negotiate. But we negotiate from a position of strength. The fleet continues operations until a treaty is signed, and our terms are non-negotiable. Full recognition of human sovereignty, a permanent seat on the Coalition Council with veto power, and war crime tribunals for every commander involved in planning our extermination. Peter smiled slightly. They will never accept those terms. Then we keep fighting until they do, Kate replied. We did not start this war, but we are damn well going to finish it. The message went out to the Coalition. Humanity was ready to talk, but only as equals. The galaxy's decision would determine whether the war ended in peace or continued until one side was destroyed completely. Humanity waited for the answer, weapons armed and ready. The neutral station called Omega Point floated in empty space between Coalition and human territory. It had been built specifically for these negotiations, a symbol that neither side trusted the other enough to meet on home ground. The station was new, sterile, and filled with security forces from a dozen neutral species who wanted no part in the war between humanity and the Coalition. Admiral Kate Sullivan arrived aboard the human battleship Defiance. Named in honor of Jake Morrison's destroyed vessel, she wore her full dress uniform, medals gleaming on her chest, each one representing a battle humanity had survived. Behind her walked Dr. Peter Kim, now Earth's chief diplomat, and Commander Ryan Hayes, still limping slightly from injuries that would never fully heal. The Coalition delegation was larger and more diverse. Ambassador Quix represented the Thalara, its crystalline body chiming nervously. War leader Zethal stood for the Vryn, mandibles clicking with barely suppressed rage. A dozen other species filled out the Coalition team, each one representing worlds that had never known defeat until humanity appeared. The negotiations began poorly. The Coalition's opening offer was insulting. Humanity could have limited sovereignty over Earth and Mars, but must submit to Coalition oversight and accept restrictions on military expansion. Human ships would be limited in number and capability. Human colonization would be restricted to approved systems. Kate listened to the terms without expression, then stood and walked toward the exit. Where are you going? Ambassador Quix chimed in confusion. Back to my ship, Kate replied coldly. We did not fight for 3 years and lose millions of people just to become your pets. You want to negotiate? Then negotiate as equals or do not waste my time. She was halfway to the door when Zethal's translation device spoke. You are outnumbered 1,000,000 to 1. Your species controls 3 planets. The Coalition spans thousands of systems. You speak of equality? Kate turned slowly, her eyes hard. You are right. We control only 3 planets. But in 3 years we have destroyed over 300 Coalition ships, liberated 24 enslaved species, and brought your 10,000-year-old empire to the negotiating table. So yes, I speak of equality, because power is not about how many ships you have. It is about what you are willing to do with them. Peter Kim stepped forward before the situation could escalate. Perhaps we should review the historical context, he said calmly. He activated a holographic display. The Coalition has admitted to 17 previous purification missions. 17 species exterminated because they were classified as threats. We have interviewed survivors from the Kelrath, the Morden, the Vax, and 8 other species the Coalition conquered or destroyed. Would the Council like to see their testimony? The display filled with faces. Aliens of all types, speaking in dozens of languages with subtitles scrolling beneath, all telling the same story. The Coalition came, evaluated, and destroyed or enslaved anyone who refused to submit. The so-called Guardians of Galactic Peace were built on a foundation of genocide and conquest. This is propaganda, Zethal hissed. This is evidence, Peter replied. Evidence we have already distributed to every major news network in Coalition space. Your civilian populations are watching this right now. They are learning what their government did in the name of peace. Ambassador Quix's crystal body vibrated with distress. This was necessary. Species like yours, violent and aggressive, threaten galactic stability. Really? Kate said quietly. She walked back to the table and placed her hands on its surface, leaning forward. Let me tell you about violence and aggression. In the past 3 years, humanity has captured over 50 Coalition ships. We have taken thousands of your soldiers prisoner. And do you know how many of them we executed? 0. Do you know how many we tortured? 0. We fed them, gave them medical care, and treated them according to the basic rules of warfare that humans established centuries ago. She straightened up. Meanwhile, your species came to Earth planning to exterminate 8 billion people, including 4 billion children, without trial, without warning, without mercy. So please do not lecture me about violence. The room fell silent. Even Zethal had no response. The moral high ground the coalition had always claimed was crumbling beneath them. A new voice spoke up, high and musical. It came from the Quar delegation, a species that looked like living clouds of bioluminescent gas. What are humanity's terms for peace? Kate nodded to Peter, who pulled up a document. Full recognition of human sovereignty over Earth, Mars, and all human colonies. A permanent seat on the Coalition Council with full veto power. The right to maintain military forces at whatever level we deem necessary. Most importantly, establishment of an independent tribunal to investigate coalition war crimes, with authority to prosecute individuals responsible for attempted genocide. Impossible, Zethal said immediately. You would have equal authority to species who have been spacefaring for millennia. You would sit in judgment of coalition officials. This is not negotiation. This is surrender. You tried to exterminate us, Ryan Hayes spoke for the first time, his voice rough with emotion. You burned our stations. You killed our people. You did this not because we attacked you, but because you were afraid of what we might become. And now you are surprised that we refuse to forget? Peter continued calmly. The alternative is simple. We continue the war. Human strike forces will keep destroying coalition infrastructure. The species you enslaved will continue their rebellions. Your economy will keep collapsing. Your government will keep fracturing. How many years can you sustain this? 5, 10? How long before the coalition breaks apart completely? The Thalara delegation conferred quietly among themselves. Finally, Ambassador Quick spoke. We require time to consult with our government. You have 24 hours, Kate replied. After that, we resume operations. The coalition delegation left the negotiating chamber. Kate sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of her 51 years. Do you think they will accept? Peter nodded slowly. The Thalara will convince them. They are logical enough to understand that continued war only weakens everyone. The Vryn will resist, but they no longer have enough political capital to stop peace. He was right. 18 hours later, the coalition returned with a counteroffer. They accepted most of humanity's terms with minor modifications. Earth would have a seat on the Coalition Council, but with limited veto power on certain issues. The War Crimes Tribunal would be established, but with judges from neutral species rather than human appointees. Human military expansion would not be restricted, but humanity must agree to defensive pacts with neighboring systems. Kate looked at the terms and made a decision. Acceptable. With one addition. Any species classified for purification in the future has the right to appeal to the full council, including Earth's representative. No more secret genocides, the coalition agreed. The Treaty of Omega was signed 3 days later, broadcast across the galaxy. Humanity was officially recognized as a sovereign power with full rights. The coalition's era of unchallenged authority was over. Kate Sullivan returned to Earth a hero. Parades filled the streets. Her face appeared on every screen. Politicians offered her any position she wanted. Secretary General of the United Earth Government, Supreme Commander of the military, anything. She refused them all. I am tired, she told the press simply. I have spent 3 years preparing for war, fighting war, and ending war. Now I want to go home. She retired to a small farm in Montana, far from cities and politics. Sometimes at night she would look up at the stars and remember the battles. Remember the faces of people who died under her command. Remember Jake Morrison's last message. She would never forget. And the nightmares would never truly end. But Earth was safe, and that was enough. Ryan Hayes became Earth's first Secretary of Defense, overseeing the continued expansion of human military forces. The lesson was carved into his soul. Weakness invited extinction, strength ensured survival. Under his guidance, humanity built the most powerful fleet in known space. Amy Scott led the reformed Void Fighter Corps, now training pilots from across the galaxy. Species that had never fought in their entire history came to Earth to learn from humans. Amy taught them with the same brutal honesty she had always used. In space, there are only 2 kinds of pilots, the quick and the dead. Peter Kim commanded Earth's diplomatic fleet, ensuring relationships with other species remained stable. He believed genuine peace was possible, but he never traveled without escorts capable of destroying planets. Trust was good, but verified trust was better. Danny Torres, now a general, continued his work across the galaxy. The former slaves of the Coalition were rising up, inspired by humanity's example. Torres provided weapons, tactics, and most importantly, hope. The galaxy was becoming more chaotic and violent, but also more free than it had been in millennia. Megan Cole and Lisa Grant led Earth's technology division, sharing human engineering principles with allied species. The galaxy slowly learned that sometimes ugly and overbuilt was better than elegant and fragile. Ships became tougher, stations became fortresses. The age of taking survival for granted was over. The most important change was cultural. Humanity compiled a complete record of the war. Every battle, every loss, every victory. Peter Kim edited